Here.
Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. We have a quorum.
All right, anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Madam Chair, no one is signed in.
Oh, Ms. Lou is absent. Oh. Approval of the minutes. She partied too hard last night.
I move approval of the minutes.
All right, thank you. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. No matters have been referred to the committee today. We have a presentation from Youth Opportunities Unlimited to share their updates with us. So whoever is going to present, please come to the podium and state your name. And welcome, thank you. We're always interested in our youth.
Hi, I'm Emily Campbell from the Center for Community Solutions.
Thanks again. We're very interested in sharing with the committee today a study that we actually released last December, but it's still very relevant for the work that you're doing now and that our whole community is undertaking as it relates to workforce. I'm going to give a little background about why we did it. And Emily from the Centers for Community Solutions is going to talk about the study, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what, as a community, we're doing as a response. I do want to acknowledge my colleague Grace Heffernan from Towards Employment. This study was officially done by all three organizations. So several years ago, YOU began to reevaluate the work we do with 19 to 24-year-olds. And it's a population, as you'll hear in a minute, is very interesting and intriguing with some of the challenges and opportunities before them. But we wanted to learn more about them. So we hired an organization to do market research. The organization, Falls Communication, interviewed 50 young adults in this age group to get a sense of their perspective, and also looked at the best practices throughout the country and generated a very intriguing report for us. Once we got it, the next step is we really wanted to do some deeper, more rigorous research around this, and so we joined with our partners, the Center for Community Solutions, to really create this as a study, look at some other data. And again, the findings are very compelling. But the reason we did it was so we can learn more about the population to serve them better. So Emily's going to talk again about what we found, and then I'll talk about what we're doing about it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to the committee for having us here this afternoon. So the Center for Community Solutions worked very closely with Toward Employment and Youth Opportunities Unlimited to look at issues relating to what we call disengaged youth. These are young people that have been called by many names. They've been known as opportunity youth because we see quite a bit of opportunity to engage these young people in school or in employment. They've been called disconnected youth, disengaged, and even idle youth. We are talking about people in our community that are ages 16 to 24, so older teens and young adults who are not in school and not working. They are disengaged from the economy at a critical point in their lives and missing opportunities to build their human capital and gain critical experience and skills. And what we found is that young people who are disengaged have an economic cost to government and society, as well as missing out on their own human capital and kind of future prospects. We found that in Cuyahoga County, there are about 21,000 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 that are not in school and not working. It accounts for about 1 in 7 people in Cuyahoga County that fall into those age groups. The numbers have remained relatively steady over the last couple of years, although one thing to note is that the number of disengaged youth in Cleveland, within the city of Cleveland, has fallen, while the number within the suburbs has increased. And so we see a concerning trend there. Over half of all the disengaged youth in Cuyahoga County, though, are from the city of Cleveland. Among this population, we see that slightly more young men than young women are disengaged, and African Americans are overrepresented among disengaged youth. Within the city of Cleveland, disengaged youth are more likely to be living in poverty. That isn't the case for youth in some of the suburban communities, which tells us that people in the suburban communities may have some additional social capital. They may be living in families that have more resources and so are disengaged from the economy for somewhat different reasons. We looked at Cuyahoga County compared to other counties, both in Northeast Ohio, across the state, and a few other comparison counties, and found that in each case, Cuyahoga County has a greater share of youth that are disengaged, except when we look at Wayne County in the Detroit area, which did not come as a particular surprise for us. We relied on some national research about the economic cost of youth being disengaged, and we found that each person between the ages of 16 and 24 who is not in school and not working costs taxpayers and society about $44,000 a year. And that is why we titled our report the $44,000 question. Doing some quick math, Cuyahoga County's 21,000 disengaged youth have a negative economic impact of over $900 million a year, almost $1 billion a year that we are missing out on because youth have not made the transition from education into the workforce, and Youth Opportunities Unlimited towards employment and others are working hard to try and make those connections at this critical moment so that we don't have more people who are falling into that situation. We also found that if these young people aren't connected to job or school by the age of 25, then the economic loss increases and could reach $20 billion over the course of the lifetime of young people that are currently in this situation right now. As Craig mentioned, we had through this research the opportunity to hear directly from young people in our community that are experiencing this situation, living this situation. And what we found overwhelmingly is that these young people have aspirations, they make plans to reach their goal, and they are absolutely willing to work hard. The challenge comes that often there are problems with the plans that they have made. We found that only 31% of those who were interviewed had a realistic plan to reach their goals. Some of the issues were things like seeking a degree that didn't relate to their job goal. A lot of people skipping steps, expecting to finish a certificate program at Tri-C, for example, and go right into broadcast journalism. And we heard a lot about young people who are very interested in being entrepreneurs. They focused on being their own boss, the kind of products that they see a market for in their own community, but only a very few of young people who hope to be entrepreneurs had any kind of expectation or interest in doing the kind of business education and learning that side of the business that they would need in order to be successful. We know that these young people face barriers. When they were asked what could prevent you from reaching your goals, 60% of the responses were related to emotional fears, worries, and barriers. Things like the fear of failure, uncertainty about the future, they've experienced in their lives that other things have come up which have made their plans go out the window, frankly, and a concern about that happening again. 40% identified barriers like the need for money, the need to care for relatives, family issues that they were facing, or other personal problems. So a lot of barriers to overcome. We also know and heard that many of these young people haven't had great experiences with some of the institutions in our community that are designed to help people overcome their disadvantages. Many of the young people come from homes where they have grown up in poverty, they have lived in poverty, they have attended schools that are failing or have challenges, and have watched their family members not have positive interactions with various government programs and even some of the nonprofit organizations. We also heard that these young people rely almost exclusively on their personal connections to get information about how to move forward in their jobs and education. Almost no one identified a government agency or a nonprofit organization as a place where they'd get information. And we found that things like mentorship could really help. People are not sure where to go. It became very clear to the interviewers that although the young people would rely on things like Google, it wasn't it wasn't likely that their search terms that they would use would turn up a fruitful search. And so as I turn things over to Craig, one of our conclusions from all of this research is that we have a number of organizations and agencies in Cuyahoga County, a number of programs that are looking to address these issues. It is that connection. You know, these young people have been called disconnected youth because they need to make those transitions from school to higher education and to the workforce. And something has happened along the way to kind of break those smooth transitions. So Craig will talk more about what Youth Opportunity Unlimited and others are doing in the community to help and improve these numbers.
Thank you. So there's a couple of things to note. First of all, there are other community initiatives that we're trying to align with. Most famously, if you will, is the Workforce Connect, the sector partnership work, and looking at that. There's also a budding initiative that hasn't gotten a lot of PR yet, but CMSD is looking at what do they do with the young people who do not follow the Say Yes path. They still know that 50% of their graduates are going to go right to the workforce, and we're working on that. The most notable thing we're doing is we're part of 5 organizations that are contracted by our friends, who I also want to acknowledge in the audience, from JFS and Ohio Means Jobs. And so collectively, there are 5 organizations that are serving this population. And one thing that is notable about that work is you've maybe heard of something called CCMEP. And on one hand, that's a new state system that has a lot of goals that are part of it. But one of the biggest parts is one of the C's and the M's stand for case management. And the theme there is this mentoring and coaching that Emily discussed that is so key to helping these young people is baked right into the model of that funding stream. So those groups collectively are day-to-day initiating programs trying to address this issue. That same group, though, separate from our contract, we get together once or twice a month to share different ideas on how we can work better together. This is part of another initiative called Generation Work, and it is something that is funded locally by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. It is facilitated primarily by Towards Employment, but also While You helps out. And the goal of that program, it really falls into 2 categories. One is, how do we collectively work together to address what we can as providers, the system, if you will. And the way we have landed is, how do we share best practices and just figure out how we work together more seamlessly. So it doesn't matter where a young person enters. They may come to Ohio Guidestone and end up at YOU. They may start off at Towards Employment but end up at Tri-C. It doesn't matter. We want to work seamlessly together on that. And 2 specific elements of that project are one is looking at racial equity and inclusion, and through that lens, and there's 2 specific things we're doing in that area. One is we're disaggregating data. There's a lot of data out there that would indicate that this situation is harder for minorities. If you look at the report, you do see elements of that. And as we disaggregate some of the data that we have, the reason we're disaggregating it is the second part of our strategy is to be much more aggressive with sharing this with employers. Because in the end, the point is to get them a job and to get them a career. And if employers know and understand some of their practices that are hopefully unintentionally inequitable, but we can teach them how they can do things a little bit more through an REI lens, we feel will open up more opportunities for the young people. Another element of this project is something called positive youth development. There's a lot of evidence out there that if you take an approach when working with young people, building on their skills and their assets versus telling them all the things they don't know. And so we're working together to share best practices around that. So that's a sampling of some of the things we are doing. Did I miss anything, Grace? No? Okay, good. As a community, but I'm particularly proud that the providers are working together and initiating on our own, how can we collectively better serve this population? So with that, I'll pause and answer any questions from the committee.
Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you. So as you came to a close, you talked about taking the aggregated data and kind of separating it out. And historically, there's been a competitive process for the jobs of the youth. Will there be any emphasis on focusing on more of the underserved population rather than, I don't know if it's a lottery type of system that you utilize right now, but I do know that there has been a large portion of the population that could really benefit from being in the program that don't get that opportunity.
So for this program, it is not a lottery system. The YOU Summer Jobs Program tends to be that way. This program is only geared to underserved because the vast majority of the funding is either WIOA or TANF. We're obligated to be working with the underserved population. And then speaking for, I believe, all of the organizations, for sure YOU and TE, but all of them, our mission is geared only to serve the underserved. So for example, we only serve Cleveland and the inner ring suburbs, or primarily 99.9% of the young people we serve are from economically distressed communities. The greater challenge that as generous as the contracts are at this point, there's still not enough. I think the contracts add up to maybe serve 1,000 youth a year, maybe 1,500 most collectively. And as Emily noted, there are 21,000. There's 11,000 in Cleveland alone. So there's definitely, we are serving only economically distressed, but there's still not enough resources to make a dent just through those contracts. That's why we're looking at other strategies.
Well, thank you for the clarification. Additionally, I wanted to, I see the notation as far as the 44,000 was used from a report from 2011 and was adjusted for inflation. But with Cuyahoga County's household income being 44,000, and that's for a household, how do we come to this number, which seems to be high to me, particularly for those who are less fortunate and not as likely to make this type of individual earnings?
Absolutely. Yes, and that is certainly the case. So if I could call your attention to page 8 of the report, which I believe you have in front of you. On table 2, you see where that estimate comes from. And so it is counting the earnings that would be lost from those young people, which accounts for almost $11,000 of that $44,000. The larger portion of the costs to society, frankly, come from some of the other negative health and social outcomes that research has shown are more likely to occur when people are disengaged from education or employment. And the largest one you see there is crime. That is not just the cost of kind of crimes that would be perpetrated, but also, the costs of perhaps increased incarceration, the cost to victims of dealing with some of the issues after they've been the victim of a crime. And so the number, only a portion of the number, about a quarter of that 44,000 is the actual earnings. But your point is very well taken.
Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, Ms. Campbell, thanks very much for this illuminating research. And of the disengaged youth that you serviced, what portion of them went through any kind of the job training programs that the organizations are providing for this population?
That to the councilman, through the chair, is an excellent question. We don't have the exact numbers. We know that some portion of the 21,000 disengaged youth have had no additional education. Many of them didn't complete high school, and have very little employment experience, but a number of them have had experiences and just for various reasons have become disengaged. And I think I'd turn to Craig to see if he has any more insight into the population that you're seeing at YOU.
Yeah, so it is a good question, and we don't know how many. It's just an interesting follow-up. How many have actually had opportunities to be served? But I would say, also going back to Councilwoman Brown's question, everyone who we collectively as a provider group serve is, for the most part of this group. But whether or not they, hopefully after they've been served by our organizations that are no longer part of this group, that's the theory, but we don't know how many of this group maybe got some services beforehand and just still fell through the cracks.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can say is that of the people that were interviewed for this project, none of them had received services from Towards Employment or Youth Opportunities Unlimited, and only a very small number had ever even heard of those two organizations.
So we have an economy that in some ways is strong, although others still find it challenging. But one thing that I'm hearing is that in this environment, some employers are willing to take a chance on some people that they might not take a chance on in an environment that were more competitive for employers and for employees. And the question I have is whether you're finding that these economic conditions are creating opportunities for you to take these disengaged youth and not only get them into employment, but get them on a path that's going to lead to living wage employment down the road.
So the short answer is yes, and your long-term prognostication, we are all a little concerned about what would happen when the inevitable economic downturn occurs. Right now, there's such a significant skills gap, and there are still so many unfilled jobs in a lot of middle skill careers that can lead to a living wage. We have had a lot of success. I would call out, I think our most successful model is one that we do with Towards Employment, which is at the University Hospital, where we get the young people to do a 4-week paid work experience. It's paid for by our county Ohio Means Jobs contracts, and it's an opportunity for them to get some experience. And then at the end of that experience, if both parties like each other, UH hires them, and we've had over 40 young people connected. And once you're in UH, you're in really good shape for a career because they have a great internal system. So we've had numerous successes like that, and so far have been riding with and have been blessed by the good economy.
Well, hopefully, even if there is an economic downturn and some people get laid off, if they've received the training and the skills and developed the necessary soft skills in the process, well, they hopefully can ride it out, and when the economy gets better, well, then they're going to have opportunities and hopefully going to be able to get back in and not at entry level.
That's the hope.
Okay, thank you.
Do you, Mr. Dorn, do the disengaged youth have any barriers? Many of them or some?
Yeah, I would say they all have some. It's just a question of how many. Emily, I think, alluded to a couple in general. One of the barriers, we feel one of the bigger barriers that often gets unstated is institutional racism. That's why we're so focused on racial equity and inclusion. In addition to that, a large group of this population have children, and the whole setup with childcare is a huge barrier. A very big one is transportation. A lot of the jobs we've been talking about that are in the economy that would pay a living wage are in locations like Solon and Mentor and Strongsville, which are not necessarily easy to get to. And then one of the other barriers that are worth mentioning, reiterating from the report, is the lack of understanding on how to really come up with and execute a realistic plan. So they are willing to work hard, they're excited about some future opportunities, but they don't know what to do to get from A to B. And so those are a couple that really stand out, but there are dozens, but those are maybe the 4 of the 5 top ones.
Okay, so that goes back, that economic, just in having a plan with economic development too, just for the youth, because back in the day, our kids had Cedar Point, Chocolate. There were some things where youth just kind of were directed to do. Not that it covered everybody. So what have what has YOU done to change this disengaged youth, or to tackle it, or?
So the two main things are making sure that any programming we're delivering through either our contracts or any funding that we get is done with excellence, and then collaborating and partnering and really doing everything we can to bring organizations together. There's no way any one organization is going to solve this on our own. So I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is that we've been part of a group that we've been facilitating or co-facilitating over the last couple of years that is bringing together any and all providers and economic development partners, folks like Jumpstart and Magnet, to convene regularly and really look at how we can together, instead of just bemoaning the system, say what can we do about it, and that the power of that partnership, it's only beginning to be realized. I think over time that can really be the effort that puts a dent in this number.
So let me make sure that we're clear on what disengaged youth there are. I was thinking more of the disengaged youth were the ones in the community that hasn't participated in any way with YOU, or are you talking about the participants of YOU and they don't want to go beyond the summer program, or what?
Yeah, this study is not about YOU youth, it's about county youth.
Okay.
So this is 21,000 16 to 24-year-olds who live in the county and are neither working nor attending any post-secondary training, and they are not in the military. So they are, shorthand for doing absolutely nothing. But their connection to YOU is superfluous. We paid for the study because we were interested in the research, but it's about the youth of Cuyahoga County.
Okay, and you may have touched on this. You talked about the economic issues that the community faces because of the disengaged youth. What is the impact to the youth? The specific impact was that, I think you touched on it with maybe idle hands and criminal behavior.
Yes, there are a number of things that research show are the impact on the youth themselves. It is the most obvious is missed opportunities for wages, for families, sustaining wages, for starting a career. Research shows that the earlier someone can be connected to a career pathway, a career ladder, the better off they will be over the course of their entire lifetime, and for their families. So there are those very clear costs. But several of the other ones that we see are that disengaged youth have been found to be more likely to commit crimes. We are also having an increasing body of research that is showing long-term health impacts of some of the same challenges that disengaged youth are facing, especially the issues of living in poverty. More likely to suffer from chronic diseases and even more likely to die prematurely from some of those issues. And another interesting thing that we found through this research is that a number of the people who were interviewed are parents themselves. And so there are generational perpetuation of poverty or breaking the cycles of poverty that could happen through some of this work. And in fact, the body of research around adverse childhood experiences, trauma, resiliency, it is showing that the most common adverse childhood experience that children in Ohio are facing is not having the resources, living in poverty, not having the resources to make ends meet, and the kind of trauma and toxic stress that causes that has a lifetime of health implications. And so the research on which our study is built looks at all those kind of factors when it considers what is defined as the costs to the individual and society.
So when you're working with CMSD, are you looking at that and those correlations? Because
So the focus on the CMSD work is working with the school staff to identify before they graduate and before it's too late, young people who are really not going to college despite what they might think or say. Because there's even before, say, yes, a lot of young people have the peer pressure. They say, oh yeah, I'm going, if you ask them what they're doing, they say, I'm going to college. But they, to my point about they don't have a plan, they actually haven't applied to a college. They haven't applied for the FAFSA. They just say it because they're parroting what they think people want to hear. But since over 50% of them don't actually go, the question is, can guidance counselors and other staff in the schools target and identify who they are, who's really not going? And so in the second semester of their senior year, can we engage them before they graduate and then become much harder to find? That's the strategy in the CMSD.
and my last question would be, if you touched on racial equity. You shared that you partner with employees to work on that impact. Have you moved into the direction to work with law enforcement?
You know, the
Because I
short.
look at this as a
Right, yeah.
preventive.
What I know what YOU does is when we're dealing with, one of the other nice things about our collaborative is everyone specializes in something else. If we encounter a young adult who is involved with law enforcement anyway, we refer them to Towards Employment, who's nationally known for that work. So in terms of us partnering with law enforcement, not so much. Towards Employment very well may.
Okay, so you utilize one of the partners that you're with. Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you. Anything
Thank
else
you.
you'd like to share with us? How's everything going with the YOU and?
Everything's going well at YOU, and before you know it, we'll be getting ready to register again for the summer. So
Okay. When does that usually start?
February
April?
February
Oh,
1st.
that is soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All
thank
right.
you very much.
Well, thank you both for coming out.
Thank you.
All right, any miscellaneous business for the committee? This meeting is adjourned.